Welcome back. Hope you're doing well. I've been doing well, a lot better than I tried to explain in one of my previous videos concerning a addiction issue. God, that's wonderful. Well, at least I'm still sober, and because of that we're going to talk about some very important subjects that I realized try to numb myself, and that created an addiction in the past for a long time. But now that I'm actually also realizing that as I grow older, I'm ready to embrace the truth and just share it with the world, and the world can think what it wants. You may accept my ideas or you may dismiss them, think them completely nonsense and crazy. It actually doesn't matter anymore. I'm just here to share some information that is coming to me rapidly, always when I'm sober, concerning the spiritual side of life, the spiritual nature of ourselves, of who we really are. Because we should not mistake ourselves for being the ego, for being the body, the phantom self. You see, that's ego. Physically speaking, you have a name, you have a gender, you have an age, you have a certain race, country. All these labels overwhelm the true infinite self. But once we reconnect with the infinite self, we can actually perceive the nonsense in which we have fallen, which is symbolic for the fall of mankind. You know, as religions all speak about in their own ways. I know in the West, Christianity is more about, well, the Bible. So there you have the Garden of Eden and the fall of mankind. The fall of humans. The fall of you and me. That is the fall from infinite self towards physical self. Towards little temporary egoic self. You know, that ego that we are is just something temporary. It's not who we really are. But our consciousness has been identifying itself with the ego, and because of that it now believes it's the ego, and the ego is that very part of us that suffers, that struggles all the freaking time. Let's be honest here. When someone dies that you love, ego cries. You know, when my mom passed away, as tragic as it was, my ego cried. My infinite self doesn't have to cry about death, because it doesn't exist. You know, death as we perceive it is just a transition. It's a change of energy. So the body itself returns back to dust. It goes back to this earth. It is made up of the elements of this physical world. So the loved one, when they pass away, they are just leaving behind the vehicle, you could say, that they used in order to function on this planet. But their infinite self operates through different frequencies. So they go on to a different dimension, realm, frequency, however you want to put it. But that's exactly what happens when you go to sleep at night as well. It's very similar. You go to bed at night and then you experience a world just as solidly real as the one that you seem to experience when you're supposedly awake. Well, in both cases you're dreaming. In both cases you're just experiencing an illusion. And while you're in this illusion, what happens? Because this is something that is perhaps very controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. I am of the opinion, after deep meditation, that in a way our conscience has been hijacked by the devil. You see? They say if you don't have a conscience, you're like a psychopath. But wait a minute, let me explain this further. If I say the conscience is hijacked by the devil, what are we talking about? Well, conscience will make you feel bad about certain things. It makes you feel bad about hurting others, by not obeying authority. It is our conscience training us to obey others. And then when you are dead, right, because this is where we're going at, when you are dead, when the body goes back to dust, and you enter the astral world, if demons in disguise come, looking all kind of nice, right, they're in disguise, so they look like nice people and beings. But don't underestimate it. If you believe in the light, there's also darkness. If you believe in angels, there's also demons. There's always this balance. So, suppose a demon in disguise came to you, but even if they don't disguise, they will still use your conscience against you to get you to reincarnate sooner or later into physical reality again. Because you start to feel bad. Maybe I should go back for another life physically to work out my karma. You see, conscience can then make you suddenly feel like, oh, I remember I was kind of rude to this person or that person or to my family or to my partner or to my children. You know what? You're right. I should go back to physical reality again and live another life of slavery, of imprisonment. By the senses, by physicality. You know, physical life is nothing unlike the true nature of freedom. Physical life is like an imprisonment, but the spirit that you really are knows total freedom. Freedom to rest in the silence. To be in the nothingness. And from that nothingness, you can then also create through divine imagination. Instantly, whatever you please. You can just do whatever you want, because God, this creator, this source consciousness, has given you everything already. But as long as we're under the belief that we are a physical human little being, and we have this conscience that wants us to obey and to behave, it's like it wants us to fit into this dimension. So, this is what I want you to understand. If we are truly part of the divine and the infinite, then we don't need a conscience. For our true nature already knows how to behave from infinite love. So conscience is like an inbuilt manipulator of the soul here on earth. Or I should say, of the mind, of the ego, of the spirit. If we are driven by the divine, we will always act rightly and don't have to question our behavior. But if we are not driven by the divine, then conscience, which is purely based on morals, and ego is a bad teacher. For it makes you even more afraid and worried about the physical side of life. And then they say, of course, people who lack conscience are psychopaths. But that is only if we ignore conscience and also ignore our divine nature. So we are entirely destructive in our behavior altogether. As you can see, it's like a picture that, if viewed from certain angles, reveals something entirely different. That's really true. I mean, think about it. I know perhaps you've not considered this angle, and it still might seem a little wacky to people out there if I say that conscience is, you don't need it. Well, they instantly worry, well, if you don't have a conscience, you'll behave badly. No. If you're then also in touch with your true nature, which is infinite love, how can you ever do anything bad then? If you come from a place of infinite love, everything you do will be good. Because sometimes, you know, there's a saying, tough love as well. Sometimes out of infinite love, you'll be a bit harsh with other people. But that is for the sake of getting them to understand their stupidity, their ignorance at times. Let's be honest. So this idea of conscience is a subtle trap, in my opinion. One of those traps that keeps spirit imprisoned in the flesh, in this world of matter, which we're called upon to overcome through all the spiritual texts throughout the ages and the religions of the world. They all tell humanity to go home, to become one with God, to become one with the Father. However, again, you want to put it, to become one with source consciousness. You can only do that if you drop the very thing that you are not, which is your ego, which is your body. Really think about it. In your case as well. In my case, I know the more I focus my mind on my true, infinite self, the more I am bound and compelled to operate from a place of true infinite compassion and love. To know that everyone is just expressing a state of consciousness. Even though it might be bad, it's still just a state of consciousness that they're expressing. But their true nature, like mine, is still infinite self. Therefore, I won't judge them in the same manner as before I had this realization. You see, if you don't understand your true nature, it's easy to start judging according to appearances, but we don't want to do that. First, we want to reconnect with our true nature, our infinite self, and from there, we can judge properly. Because the judgment then actually becomes just simply a matter of perspective. Oh, they see the world like this? No wonder they act like this. I see the world like this. No wonder I act like this. So our goal here is to keep our perspective, our perception, developing in a more and more divine direction. Away from the limitations of the ego, so that way we perceive reality from the broader scale, from the scale of infinity, even though we can't literally perceive infinity because it's infinite, but you get the idea. You start to perceive beyond the illusion of this phantom ego self. That's where you find your true freedom, and that's where you realize that conscience can indeed be hijacked by the devil, And when that happens, you start to worry way too much about all kinds of stuff that you don't need to worry about if you were to remember who you really are and reconnect with that.